Hey guys, welcome. I'm going to interview this amazing midwife, and if you guys don't know who I am Stephanie Rodriguez, and you are tuning into Healing Life Q&A. I am a mother of six children from 17 to 2 years old, and I've been working professionally with women, helping them with holistic healing through full spectrum doula and health coaching. And now, I have the pleasure to interview a senior midwife who has been a midwife for 18 years since 1994. And she is well known in New Mexico. And she is licensed in New Mexico too. And she's been there for 2002 being a licensed midwife. Not only that, she's been certified and trained in birth story listening and birth work process since 2012 and 2013. And not only that, before I forget, she also heavily helped people and family through online child education and birth story listening sessions. And you can always find more information about that in www.mymidwifeheather.com. So let's welcome Heather Rische. How are you?
Hi, Stephanie.
Thank you for being here with us. I'm super excited, especially in the topic of birth story listening. So I've always been curious on that. I always like listen into, and follow the other midwife who started that certification, but never
Mhm.
had the privilege to go and dive in and learning. So what made you go into that certification?
I think my own birth experiences really was what inspired it because I could see how I had two very similar looking births on the outside have two very different emotional effects. And then the same with my clients, my home birth clients who would have like a birth that seemed really straightforward from my perspective, but then I would see that they felt traumatized by it. And then the reverse, a birth that seemed like, whoa, that was really intense. We're going to have to really work on processing this together. And then find that that client didn't seem that traumatized and didn't state that they were that traumatized by the process. So I think it's just important that we see how each person is affected by their birth and help them process whatever it was in whatever is important to them.
Hmm. Yeah, I do find that because I'm a doula and I sometimes go to hospitals or even birth centers and home births, and I feel when as a professional you're the third eye of the birth, you're looking at it, you're just like, oh my god. And there's times that they're just totally fine, and there's times that I feel like my midwife and my doula and my birth also did that too. Like they're like, you are so great, you are amazing, and I'm like, no. Like these pains were horrible, like the worst pain ever, like on my sixth child. Like I was just like, I don't know, I felt like I wasn't bonding with my child. Like I felt it was
Mhm.
so different and out of control of the pains. So it's just weird
Yeah.
how we were on the same time there, but we interpret different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so many people have that experience that you're having where you have so much like, but I didn't do well, or like you said, I didn't bond, or I didn't cope with those contractions as well as I thought I would. And that's the important story. Whether we as the birth worker think it's important, it doesn't matter. It's what the person is feeling. And I think there's like a big trend too where everybody thinks they have to post their birth story on social media or tell it right away, or post pictures of it, and it can make you even feel even more raw and vulnerable, especially when looking back on it. um or like if people kind of demand it, like, I want to hear your birth story, I want to hear your birth story, and a lot of times we're not ready. And one of the things that Pam England, who did the training in birth story listening that I did, says is that you're still in the story when you are 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, it could even be 3 months out. You're still actually in the story. So telling the story then might be great for everybody else, but it's not really that great for you most of the time, the person who gave birth.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
kind of precious and raw and vulnerable and special and private still, as you're trying to integrate it into yourself. Because it's still, things are still happening, right? We're still learning how to care for the baby and whatever it weighs and adjusting to the sleep, but also it's just emotionally it's still processing.
Yeah. And that's why I was in love when I became, emotional, energetic, holistic sessions and therapy because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it also depends how you've been processing all your emotions in all your life. Like, do you just tend to restore it and put it somewhere and not process it because it's too painful or too much to handle, or energetically it stays within the body? And I
Yeah.
love that, and even with like a doula, I am a Reiki master, and it's crazy how sometimes when the client allows you to do Reiki at the birth, when they're not processing, like they're not proceeding and continue dilating a certain amount,
Mm-hmm.
I could do like a quick Reiki, and the body tells me like I'm still stuck in this process because before the epidural, I was in extremely pain, and I was able to release that. And then within an hour, she's like fully dilating out. So I just think that's
Wow.
all is fascinating. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like, that's why I'm so excited to interview you. And so
Mm-hmm.
another question I've been pondering is, why is this so? I know it's important for clients to process, and this is why there's sessions and therapies and counseling. However, I feel like, why is it so important for birth workers to also process birth stories?
That's a great question. Yeah. Um, well, I think it just makes us better birth workers, but it's also part of self care, right? Um, we process birth stories on a professional level, right? Like we say, wow, well the contractions were doing this, and so I tried this, and it helps to get that peer response sometimes, and that's like the professional peer review process. But then the emotional processing, how can you not have an emotional effect from being at a rite of passage so intense and sacred to another person? To be in that space with that person and not be affected is impossible. So we're carrying traumas, and again, our trauma might be different than the client's trauma. And that's why, one of the reasons why, when the client is telling the birth story to the person who is at to a person who is at the birth, they might shift their story a little, because there's always that changing story. One of the reasons it's important for someone to process their story with someone who wasn't there is so that they can tell their own truth without saying, because we don't want to say to our client, man, I was really traumatized when I saw the doctor or midwife do this thing to you. You don't want to say that to them. You don't want to put your trauma on them, but you need to process it, because you will carry it to the next birth or into your life and into your dreams and into your, your resting time and all that. So we have to have a way to check in and validate our own best intentions of whatever we did or whatever part we played, and also just as an observer and someone who's holding space and whose heart is open during that process, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I remember being on the retreat, and a friend was telling me that she helps in the birth as like I guess a midwife assistant, and
Mm-hmm.
she goes, "This is why I never wanted to have babies, because everything I've seen."
Yeah.
Or midwives say, "And thank goodness I had babies before I was a midwife," and I'm just like, what does that mean? I'm gonna start going to midwifery school. I mean, I
Mhm.
understand in some way because I've done some doula, but I guess before I was doing doula work, I was like, what does that mean? Like,
Wow.
what are you
Yeah.
talking about? And I'm just like,
Hmm.
it's scary. Like, I don't know, it makes you feel like also intimidated and like, do
Yeah.
I want to attend birth too?
You do.
But
You do.
I do. It is. It is really beautiful. Like when you are there, it's just really nice, and like their
Mhm.
accomplishments, especially postpartum, when no matter what, either had C-section or birth or are
Yeah.
able to
Absolutely.
breastfeed. Like I thought, it's like those are huge like accomplishments that when your client could do stuff, and you're like, yes, I don't know, it
Yeah.
feels awesome.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like I've I know lots of midwives who kind of did the opposite, where they didn't have babies until they trained to be midwives, and they were super inspired to have babies. So I guess there's always two sides.
Yeah, that's so true. I have a friend who was a midwife and she's always been wanting to have a baby forever, and that's why she became a doula because they're like, hey, if you want to have a baby so bad, go into the doula world, and then she became a student midwife, and then somehow she ended up just having a baby without an medical assistance,
Oh
and
wow.
I was just like, wow. And her first time, I was like, wow, like
Hmm.
you're definitely hardcore, you know.
Wow.
But another question is, I know you're going to be listening, and I know you're probably not in their birth, and you're like someone out of the picture, and they're coming to you, midwives or clients, and you're listening as well to birth stories. How do you take care of yourself where you don't have to also absorb their trauma or their
Yeah.
experience?
Gosh, you doing your energy work would probably answer this better than I can, but I feel like it's always a learning process, whether you're helping someone process the story or just going to a birth, being able to take that time afterward to do whatever it is that helps you, whether it's take you know, a hot bath or, get out into nature or whatever. I think we all have our ways that we have to practice self-care. And one of those ways is trying to figure out that balance between not letting your heart get so pulled into someone else's story, and also having your heart be there, because that's what we do, right? We're being empathic, and we are doing heart work in the end, but finding that balance between protecting yourself and keeping the space for the client. And I think one way to really do that is to release the ego around what we do and make sure that we realize it's not about us. It's not like a lot of people might want to leave a birth and be like, oh my God, blah, 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 and talk about it and have it be part of our identity. But ultimately, it's not our story. It's not, we, in the best case scenario, we're very silently in the background helping without making ourselves too much a part of it.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. Everyone's individual. I think one of the ways that I help to release is like painting. I love painting,
Nice.
or just crying it out. It's just like,
Mhm. Yeah.
just releasing it, or
Yeah.
doing some emotional releasing techniques that I keep
Mhm.
doing until like that emotion has diminished.
Mhm.
You just gotta keep doing it. And the thing about energy work is very subtle, but people want something like a magic pill. But you have to keep on doing it until you feel like that emotion has diminished. And if it's not diminishing, then this is why you start asking questions like, is there something else holding me? And then understand where that root comes, and release until like you don't feel it. You feel lighter. And
Yeah.
that's something that I do, and that helps a lot. So yeah.
That's really
Okay.
sweet. Yeah. I think even like, well, of course, I would say I've done some birth story listening sessions with midwives that have helped them, I hope, to kind of process. But I love that you do painting, or even like, doing like any kind of little ceremony that you could create for yourself as a birth worker, knowing like this is what I have to do after every birth, you know, whether it's painting or smudging yourself with herbs, or
Hmm.
drinking your cup of tea and writing down some notes, it could be whatever.
Yeah, and I know you do. You know about herbs, and you study about herbs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you could even take some calming herbs if there was a birth that was really having you. But I was just thinking about doing like clearing. People might use sage or another herb depending on what their tradition is, to
Hmm.
use smoke to kind of do a cleansing.
Wow. Yeah. So that's really awesome. And the way I started learning more, and the reason I was curious into interview is because I just did a training for ICANN, and in ICANN they have Pam. They're teaching about birth stories,
Oh,
for
cool.
cesarean. And so I know it
Mm.
breaks it down. And I know she says to like change it up or how to like break the
Yeah.
cycle. And
Hmm.
so that's why I'm like super fascinated. I'm like, oh my God, I have to like somehow learn this.
Yeah.
Because I don't know,
Well,
I'm
that,
just like learning. But yeah.
yeah, that's wonderful that she's providing some of the training with them. I know that the process is now birthing from within is she's kind of let that go to some other facilitators now, and you can still take the birth story listening course, but or no, she still teaches it. Sorry, she still teaches it, but all the other stuff is is being done by other facilitators now.
Right, I did see that. I think maybe
Yeah.
like in the birth story, there isn't one more other facilitator. They rotate. Either
Okay. Yeah.
Pam or someone else. I was looking at
Yeah.
it. But yeah, eventually that's on my to-do list. And
Yeah.
so that I think that's really important to process, emotions, trauma, any
Hmm.
buildup of energy. And this is one type of sessions that you guys could do, especially, and you do them online as well, right?
I can do them like this, like on Zoom, or I can do them over the phone. I would have done them in person in the past, but I think right now it's still probably safest to just do it this way. I also find that a lot of people can do some different work over the phone where they're not having to worry about their, like I don't want someone to see me cry because crying is always a part of it. you know Sometimes it's easier to just be on the phone, and then you can do the crying part that you need to do.
Yeah, and
And
it could be in the comfort of their home.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I can kind of zero in. I mean, part of the work, like you said, is really listening very closely and hearing those moments of the story that you think might be at the root of some of what the person needs to process. I won't always say where the trauma is, because it's not always about trauma. It's just about something that needs processing in some way. Um, and like you said, then helping to reframe a part, especially when people are blaming themselves for something, and helping the person to see what their best intentions were and what they did really well during the process, and helping to point those things out to people. And it takes
Yeah.
listening really, really closely.
Yeah, especially when you say when we blame ourselves. Like I think that's something that as women are we tend to take that heavy role that we have to be the protectors and the givers and we need to do this
Yeah.
and that and and this is where we start blaming my body failed me or I didn't do this correctly, but it could be a lot of things that going on in the birth that
Yeah.
maybe didn't help and optimize the situation doesn't mean it was her fault or wasn't explained or supported through that process. And this is why I think it's so important to process it. And this, thank goodness that I know you and you do things online. People could come to you no matter where they're at
Yeah.
because and a lot of people normally an average of a person holds 300 to 400 emotions internally within our body. That's like some studies have shown in the
Yeah.
energy world. And I think that's really important. And so, how can people find you for more information, or how would you like to support them in that way?
Well, like you said, I think my website, mymidwifeheather.com, has a contact form, and that goes straight to my email. I'm on Facebook as well under Matryoshka Midwifery, um, which is, I don't know, hard to spell, but I could spell it out if you want me to, or you could just post a link for people.
Yeah, so I'll go back and add more. I already have your website there, but I'll add more
Mhm.
description and I could put your Facebook
Okay.
as well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Just if people get in touch with me, we just work out a time to schedule it. My website does have a short description of how I do the birth story process, what someone might expect of it, um, how long it might last. I do a sliding scale payment for it. I don't turn anybody away. If somebody needs this process, I want to work with them no matter what, their financial situation is. Um, and yeah, people should
Okay.
expect to have a session, have like we've talked about that self-care thing, even though it's, we love our babies and we have all this I want to be a good mom thing, making sure you have someone to hold your baby for you, or keep your toddler out of the way.
Yeah, just for like that. And how long does it normally last, those sessions?
It varies. I kind of go a lot longer than Pam England has taught. Like I often go to an hour and a half with people, but sometimes it's as short as 45 minutes.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, that's fantastic. So thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you very much for allowing me to interview. I think this is like amazing resource and just letting people and bring awareness for birth story listening sessions. And since you're certified, I think that's really great. And just to let you guys know that I'm also launching a free guide that I just launched called Reframing Womanhood Guide. So not only that, I could give you Heather's information and this guide all together in an email, and you guys could, continue your guys' journey to have a smooth transition to womanhood in different phases. So thank you very much for joining, and see you guys later.